Hey everyone, and welcome. So we all know our planet's climate is changing, but it's not just about rising seas and melting ice. It's also having a huge impact on our health. Today, we're going to get into how a warming world is rewriting the rulebook for infectious diseases, creating totally new risks, and get this, even reawakening some really old ones.
Just let that sink in for a second. Over half. This isn't some small side effect we're talking about. This is a massive, fundamental shift in the landscape of global health. And this one statistic, really, it sets the stage for everything we're about to explore. A story that actually begins way up in the frozen north. So, picture this. It's the summer of 2016 in Siberia, and a heat wave, unlike anything they'd seen, hits the region. The frozen ground, the permafrost, starts to thaw. And as it does, something that had been locked away in the ice since 1941 was set free: anthrax. These reawakened spores ended up killing over 2,000 reindeer and putting dozens of people in the hospital. It was this incredibly stark lesson in how a warming climate can literally unearth diseases we thought were buried deep in the past.
That anthrax outbreak is, a truly chilling example of a threat coming back from the dead, so to speak. But climate change isn't just about reviving old dangers. It's also pushing diseases we're fighting right now into brand new territories. So let's dig into how the front lines of these diseases are expanding as we speak.
Okay, to really get how these diseases are on the move, we first have to talk about their travel agents, the vectors. You know them: mosquitoes, ticks, certain flies. These are the little couriers that carry pathogens from one host to the next. They're the absolute critical link in the chain of infection for so many of the world's most dangerous diseases.
So the key thing to understand here is that these vectors are super sensitive to their environment. For, centuries, cold winters and high altitudes have been like natural walls, keeping tropical diseases contained. But as the planet warms up, those walls are basically dissolving. We're now seeing vectors move towards the poles and up mountainsides, surviving in places they never, ever could before. And of course, they're bringing diseases like dengue, Zika, and malaria right along with them.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because climate change is what we call a threat multiplier. If you just look at dengue fever, climate change by itself is expected to expose another 8 to 12% of the population to the mosquitoes that carry it. But, and this is the kicker, when you combine that warming with other things like more people moving to cities and global travel, that risk of exposure skyrockets to 50%. See, climate change isn't happening in a bubble, it's pouring gasoline on other fires.
And all of this leads to a number that is it's honestly hard to wrap your head around. One study projects that by the year 2070, an additional 4.7 billion people could be at risk for diseases like malaria and dengue. That's just because of how climate change is literally redrawing the map for where these mosquitoes can live. That's the staggering scale of the challenge we're looking at.
All right, so it's not just the air and the land that are becoming more dangerous. Let's shift gears and look at the threats moving through our most vital resource: water. Climate change is making our water supply more volatile, and at both extremes, too much or too little, disease finds a way to thrive. And here, you can really see the paradox of water risk. On one side, you've got massive floods from extreme rainfall. They completely overwhelm our sanitation systems, creating this toxic soup of runoff and sewage that washes pathogens straight into our drinking water. But then on the other side, you've got droughts. When water gets scarce, people are forced to use just a few water sources, which get crowded, stagnant, and heavily contaminated. It's a perfect storm for concentrating nasty pathogens. And it's not just about how much water there is, but its temperature. Warmer oceans, lakes, and rivers are basically turning into perfect incubators for dangerous microbes. We're talking about things like Vibrio cholerae, the bacteria that causes cholera, and Vibrio vulnificus, which you can get from contaminated seafood. And then there are the rare but absolutely terrifying ones, like Naegleria fowleri, better known as the brain-eating amoeba, which just loves warm, fresh water.
Okay, so we've seen diseases expanding their turf and contaminating our water. But there's another, even more direct way climate change is raising the stakes. It's forcing the animal world and the human world to collide in new and dangerous ways. Welcome to the world of zoonotic spillover.
So the crucial thing to get here is that a spillover isn't just one random event. It's a chain reaction, a cascade. It all starts when climate change and deforestation mess up an animal's natural home. That forces them to move into new areas looking for food and water, areas that are often much closer to us. That leads to more contact, which creates more opportunities for the pathogens they carry to make the leap from an animal to a person.
And to make this really concrete, let's just talk about bats. Bats are natural hosts for some of the world's most dangerous viruses. Think coronaviruses, think Ebola. Well, studies are showing that bats are one of the animal groups making the biggest moves because of climate change. As their habitats change, they fly into new regions, bumping up against other animals. And yeah, us.
So, the threats we've covered so far, expanding vectors, dirty water, spillover, are really just known risks getting worse. But now we get to the really wild stuff. Climate change is also creating truly new threats and reawakening dangers that have been lying dormant for, in some cases, thousands of years. Take the really weird case of Candida auris. This is a fungus that's resistant to multiple drugs, and it seemed to pop up on 3 different continents at the same time, almost out of nowhere. A leading theory is that this might be the first fungal pathogen of the climate change era. The idea is, as the world warmed up, this fungus had to adapt to survive higher temperatures out in the wild. And in doing that, it accidentally crossed the thermal barrier that normally protects us from most fungi. It basically learned how to live at human body temperature.
And that brings us back to the Arctic, which is warming up about 4 times faster than the rest of the planet. All that thawing permafrost isn't just releasing greenhouse gases. Scientists call it a biological archive that's being unlocked. It's a frozen library of ancient microbes, some of which haven't seen the light of day in tens of thousands of years.
And this brings us full circle, right back to that anthrax outbreak. This timeline just lays it out so clearly. A reindeer dies from anthrax in 1941. Its body gets frozen in the permafrost. For 75 years, it's no big deal. But then, one unusually hot summer changes everything. The ground thaws, the spores escape, and a disease from the past becomes a crisis in the present.
Now, it's really important to add some context here. The whole idea of a zombie virus coming out of the ice and causing a pandemic, well, most scientists say that's extremely unlikely. Viruses are just too fragile. But as the anthrax outbreak proved, the risk from ancient bacteria, which can form these tough, long-lasting spores, that is not theoretical. That is a proven, real-world risk.
So we've gone from mosquitoes in the tropics to ancient bacteria in the Arctic. But to really get the whole story, we have to zoom out. Because the biggest takeaway here is that climate change, as powerful as it is not acting alone. I think this quote from a researcher really nails it. Climate change is described not as the main driver of disease, but as a modulator. Something that sets the stage, provides the context, and makes all the other problems that much worse.
You have to see it as this complex web, right? Climate change intersects with deforestation, which pushes animals closer to our cities. It intersects with poverty, which might limit someone's access to clean water during a drought, turning a bad situation into a catastrophe. And it definitely intersects with global travel, which can turn a small, local outbreak into a global crisis in just a few days. All these factors are tangled together, and climate change is basically turning up the heat on the whole system.
So this leaves us with a pretty critical realization. The lines that used to protect us, they're blurring. The line between hot and cold climates, between the animal and human worlds, and even the line between the ancient past and our present day. The ecological anchors that kept diseases in their place are coming loose. And so the real question isn't just whether our health systems are ready, but whether we can adapt fast enough to a new world where the old rules of disease just don't apply anymore.